Hello, today we are going to talk about trig graphs with phase shifts. Okay, so by the end of today, we're going to be able to graph the sine and cosine functions with the phase shifts and identify the amplitude and the period, which is something that we did yesterday. So first, what is a phase shift? Okay, a phase shift is going to be a horizontal shift for a periodic function. And today we're going to do those with sine and cosine. So if it is a horizontal shift, what part of the graph does the phase shift affect? Okay, well think about it. What part of the graph is going to be horizontal? The x-axis. So the phase shift is going to affect the x-axis. So yesterday we did some vertical shifts that were going to be up or down. Today we're going to do horizontal shifts, which are going to be left and right. So those are going to affect the x-axis. So first let's talk about the equations. So if you have y equals a sine of k times x minus b, okay, your b is going to be the phase shift. Okay, so your phase shift value is going to be b. Now the amplitude is still going to be the absolute value of a from yesterday. The period is still going to be 2 pi over k, and that's the same as yesterday as well. Okay, now notice here it says k has to be greater than 0. Okay, so your k value here, if your k value is 1, that's when your period is still just going to be 2 pi. And then if anything is added or subtracted to the x value, that will be your phase shift. Now notice that in the equation it says minus b, which is the same thing as the opposite of b. So if you had, if you saw x minus pi over 2, it means it would be going pi over 2 to the right. And if you saw plus, it means it would be going to the left, because that would be like minus a negative. Okay, so you have an amplitude A, a period of 2 pi k, and your phase shift is going to be B. So that might be something good to highlight. So your amplitude is A, your period is 2 pi over k, and then your phase shift is going to be B. Now, it tells you an appropriate interval that you could graph this on. It says B to B plus 2 pi over k. Remember, 2 pi over k is just the period. So it's really whatever your phase shift value is, that's where you could start. And then the phase shift plus the period is where you could end. Now, notice that the values of the amplitude and period are going to be the same without the phase shift. So the phase shift is not going to affect what your amplitude is going to be, and it's not going to affect what your period is going to be. Those are going to be the same no matter what. Now you also want to observe where the value of k is. So you can see k here is on the outside of the parentheses for x minus b. So this is asking us, what would we have to do if there was a coefficient of x that was not 1 in order to get the proper k value in the phase shift? Okay, so if the coefficient of x is not 1, we're going to have to factor out the coefficient so that we can put it in this form. So I'm going to have you find the phase shift of the following functions for example 1. Alright, so I'm going to have you write those down. And I'm going to give you some time to see if you can find the phase shift of each of those. Alright, so let's see how we did. So the coefficient of x is 1. Okay, so we don't have to factor anything out, but we do have this 4 value that's already on the outside. That is going to be your k if you're finding your period, but this is not going to affect our phase shift. So if we have x minus pi over 2, then the phase shift is going to be pi over 2 units to the right. You can also think of it as if you were to set this equal to 0 and solve, your x value would be pi over 2. This is going to be a positive value, and it will be pi over 2 units to the right. Now for b, we can see that the coefficient is not 1, so we have to factor out the 4. So if we factor out the 4, we have to find what this missing value is. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this by 4 to find this value. because really, if you're distributing, it's 4 times x to get 4x, 4 times blank, that would get pi over 2. So to find this, we just have to divide. So if you do pi over 2 divided by 4, we're going to skip and flip and multiply, or multiply by the reciprocal, which is 1/4. So this would be pi over 8. So that means your b value, because this is a plus here, is going to be negative pi over 8. And this is going to be a phase shift pi over 8 units to the left. Here's another way you could write the equation with the 4 in the proper spot for k. So if you have x plus pi over 8, it will be negative pi over 8 because we're going to the left. C is similar to the last one, where we are going to end up having a negative value again. Now, when you factor out the 1/2, just like we did before, we're going to have to divide pi over 6 by 1/2. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. We'd get 2 pi over 6, which is going to be pi over 3. And then our b value would be negative pi over 3, which is going to be a phase shift of pi over 3 units to the left. Okay, and then here's your value right there. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is graph it.